Why are fairies and unicorns and mermaids like where they're always lumped together for some reason? They always end up being together, and it's because they have a common thread. I think in every person, there's kind of this deep longing for that magic mystic that the divine feminine brings. We miss the part of us that has been cast out into the wilderness, and we long to bring it back. And that's why we gravitate towards these things, and you can't get rid of them. No matter how the church tried, like it couldn't get rid of it.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today for this episode of All Things in One, Reuniting Religion with the Woman in the Wilderness. And today I have with me the amazing, the lovely Julie Dean Richards. Hey Julie.
Hey.
So, just to let you know a little bit about Julie, she is a wife, a mother of three, doula, herbalist, astrologer, numerologist, attorney, and the co-founder of Feminine Alchemist School of the Deep Feminine. She is also the co-host of the podcast Feminine Alchemy. Before completing her doctorate degree in law, Julie worked in research for 7 years. She consulted high-touch clients such as Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and Google on creating and completing peer-reviewed and other research projects. She has lived in 3 countries and speaks 5 languages. However, Julie has always been deeply spiritual, a follower of Christ, and interested in the divine feminine, the quantum field, spirituality, and esoteric topics. She is an advocate for bodily autonomy, including home and free birth. Julie balances logic and wisdom by combining nature's rhythms, modern astrology, science, and law to help her clients realize their greatest potential. So, welcome, Julie.
Hey, thank you. I know. I was like, oh no, that bio was so long. I should have said something smaller, but
No,
thanks for reading it all.
you just have so many interesting and cool things about you. We have to get it all out there so people really get a feel for who you are. In fact, all of that, as I'm reading through that, I'm like, this is why you and I get along so well. We just have so many common interests. I wanted to be like this herbalist midwife at one point and live off the land. You're basically going nomadic over the next several months with your family, right?
Yes, totally. We are going to be kind of living tent life for a while. We'll be staying with friends, but we will be going from campsite to campsite. So it's really exciting.
That's so great. Well, because Julie does have such an interesting and eclectic background, every time I talk to her, I'm like, Julie, we should have a conversation about this. And then I'm like, Julie, we should have a conversation about this. So I may just make you like an unofficial co-host of this series with me, Julie. But
Oh, I would love that. This is like the most amazing series. Everyone, if you haven't realized it yet, like you are in great hands and this is an amazing series. So I'm honored to be here, Jocelyn.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I wanted to touch on a topic in my book that it killed me not to be able to include more about this, but the book was already so long. So I want to get into this actually by starting off by telling you that I just got home yesterday from Orlando, Florida, like for the first time. And can you guess what I did there, where I went when I was in Orlando?
Oh, were you at Disney World?
Close. I was at Epcot.
Oh, yay. So fun.
Yeah, and so you can guess where I'm going with this, right? So,
Maybe a little.
yeah. So Walt Disney, right? He was kind of like this really interesting figure if people have seen the Marvel like the series, right? What is it? Excuse me, The Avengers. Tony Stark's dad's totally based on Walt Disney, right? And he's kind of a controversial figure these days. And so my question for you is, what do you think, Julie? Was Walt Disney an evil genius or an inspired innovator and perhaps even chivalrous champion of the divine feminine?
Oh, this is an interesting question. I haven't spent tons and tons of time studying Disney per se, him himself. I
Hmm.
have looked at his astrology birth chart a little bit, but I do think whether or not it was his idea to do so, he actually is bringing a lot of themes about the divine feminine forward. And we're not really noticing that as we're watching it. We just like see these tales and we're like, oh, this is just an old tale based off like whatever it is, Grimm fairy tales or some classic tales. But actually, I think he has brought forth a lot of stuff surrounding the divine feminine, even if it's wrapped in a little bit of a different paper. As to whether or not he's a good person or what he is, I don't know enough to say per se. What do you think, Jocelyn?
I think, I think nothing's black and white in this world, but the more that I have learned about the divine feminine, the more I go back to these Disney films. Like my daughter and I were doing this marathon of all the old Snow White and Sleeping Beauty, and we're seeing all of these things pop up. Like there's this tapestry at the beginning of Sleeping Beauty, and it's called The Lady and Her Unicorn. Are you familiar with that?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. We have to talk about this.
Okay. So I'm like there's no way that's not intentional. He's
Mm.
totally inserting all of this divine feminine stuff into these tales. There's a reason why he took these old tales, right, and brought them to the forefront of society in the 20th century. So yeah, let's just go ahead and start there, Julie. What do you have to say about this tapestry called The Lady and Her Unicorn?
Oh, I love this. Okay, so the first thing I want to say for people to give some background is I spent a lot of time studying divine feminine symbols
Mhm.
and where they hang out and how to find them. And a lot of us feel like there aren't very many divine feminine symbols, but I've actually collected almost 70 now, 70 divine feminine symbols, which is amazing. It's been
Yeah.
like such a journey. But one of them I was kind of surprised about was the unicorn. And, a lot of people, I think this one is almost like a stereotypical girl symbol or something that little girls like my little girl, she's obsessed with unicorns right now. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to nurture this and foster this because this is the divine feminine in real life. But why the unicorn and why is the unicorn so important to the divine feminine? Well, the unicorn is tied actually back to Mary Magdalene. So if people know the tale of her actually being the wife of Christ, the tale goes, right, that she was pregnant. Have you gone over a bunch of this already? Because I don't want to double.
Not at all. It's in the book, of course. But no, as with I haven't talked with anybody else about this yet. So,
Okay, perfect. I just didn't want to give a bunch of overview people had already had. But let's just summarize for a minute because there's a lot of stuff about Mary that's going to tie into these fairy tales and not just this one, but many, many, many. So we have to look at Mary first. So in this perspective, Mary is the wife of Christ. And when Christ dies, Mary is pregnant. She already has two other children. Now, some people say that Mary has five kids. So there is kind of that line of thought. But traditionally, usually what you find is three branches or three children. And so after Christ dies, she gets out of Jerusalem, she goes to Egypt, and she has Sarah, which means princess, her daughter, Sarah. And the two other children are boys, older, Jesus and Joseph. So Jesus the younger, and then Joseph, perhaps named after his father, or Joseph of Arimathea, who in this tale, Joseph of Arimathea is actually related to Mary, or to Christ. I think it's through yeah, it's Mary's brother, right? Isn't Joseph of Arimathea her like
like
great?
like the Virgin Mary's brother or uncle or something like that,
Yes, yeah,
right?
sorry, the Virgin Mary. Yeah,
Yeah.
her uncle. And so Joseph of Arimathea and sometimes John the Beloved are seen as protectors of Mary Magdalene. After she has this baby, John, and the baby and Joseph of Arimathea, the kids, they all get into a boat. And when they get into the boat, they cross the ocean. At the end of crossing the ocean, huge storm hits the boat and everyone's capsized, and so Mary and her children, they have to swim the last little few feet to shore, and it's this miracle that they make it to shore and she emerges out of the water, and we're going to talk about that later. But she ends up in France, and there's still a city there today called De la Mer. And in De la Mer, they celebrate all of this stuff. Her sons end up going to England. Mary herself is seen as Celtic, that she comes from the Rechabites who are over in Scotland. That's why she's always pictured as having red hair. So that's important to pick up on because we're going to talk about that later. Red hair. And Mary starts teaching the gospel. Her and John, they start teaching this gospel. There are churches that pop up, the churches of Mary and John. And then through history, right? Like she's in France. Some people believe she went back to England and to Scotland and that area. She's preaching and she's talking all about, right, divine union, which of course she is the wife of Christ, right? So we're talking about the masculine and the feminine coming together, rising together, working together. And Mary is often depicted as this unicorn. So this brings us back to the unicorn, this mystical creature. Now, why is she the unicorn in this tale? Well, the unicorn is actually connected to the house of Ephraim, right? Because they used to translate that we talk about it as oxen, but they used to translate that word as unicorn. And so the idea is that because Mary comes from the Rechabites, she comes from the house of the unicorn. And so if you look around in England, you look around all these pieces, who will you see? Well, where does Christ come from? He is the lion. He comes from, I almost said Leo. He comes from
Right.
Judah.
That's your astrologer coming out.
That's right. He comes from the house of Judah, right? So that Judah is associated with the lion. So look everywhere in the UK. What do you see together? The unicorn and the lion, the unicorn and the lion. Well, what happens to the Church of Mary? The Church of Mary has to go underground. Why? Because the Catholic Church rises up. They really don't like this. They don't want to talk about Christ being married. They don't want to have, we start to squish and squish the divine feminine down, down, down. And so then we get these tapestries and these tapestries of the last unicorn, the lost unicorns, the unicorns being fenced. And what does that mean? Well, that is all about Mary, right? What happened to Mary? Well, they silenced her, right? They put her underground. What about all these tales we have about hunting the unicorns, hunting the last unicorns? Well, that's all about getting rid of the divine feminine. That's all about getting rid of and squelching the Church of Mary and this idea of ascension between masculine and feminine. And so when we see this tapestry in Sleeping Beauty, to bring it full circle, right? What is that reminding you of? That's giving you the clue. Sleeping Beauty is the unicorn, right? She's the unicorn. Why does she go to sleep? What happens? Why is she going to sleep? It's because the divine feminine, right? They put it to sleep. They backed it down, right? The unicorn, they pushed into a corner. Anyway, that's a lot of talking for me, but Jocelyn, what are your thoughts about this symbol in general? Because I would love to just hear your thoughts about this too.
Oh, well, that's so fantastic. Thank you for doing that because that was a great lead into all of this. So, like you said, it's this idea of this beast, almost this mythological beast, right? That is hunted. And I see so much of that in the scriptures because like Sleeping Beauty in the Song of Solomon, for instance, which I go into this in the book, but the idea is the Song of Solomon really is this prophecy about Jesus and Mary Magdalene. I mean, that is certainly one way of looking at it. Other people interpret it as, oh, it's about Jesus and his relationship with Israel, and it can be that. But if you really break it down, which I do in the book, it's very much related to the role that Mary Magdalene plays and that she embodies as this divine feminine figure. You could say this high priestess of the goddess and things like that, and the role that she plays in being intertwined with Jesus, with his ascension, with helping him ascend to his throne on high. She represents all of that. And in the Song of Solomon, she is also pursued. She is driven out into the wilderness. She's beaten, she's disgraced, she's hidden, things like that. And then you go on to, I want to say it's Ezekiel. No, Isaiah, excuse me. I should know this because I've taught an Isaiah class. And then in Isaiah, and I believe you actually had a conversation with Dave Butler about this concept. But in Isaiah, he talks about something similar, but he's relating it to this tree. And it's this tree that's taken out and it's, beaten up and it's defiled or it's unveiled, things like that. And of course, a tree is heavily symbolic of the divine feminine and this woman, right? So I guess I should bring it back now to Sleeping Beauty. So what you have in Sleeping Beauty is like in all these fairy tales that Disney puts out there, you have this girl who grows up not knowing who she is. She has no idea she's royalty. She doesn't understand the greatness and the potential that she has and that destiny. So in a sense, she's always asleep. She's been asleep the whole time. And the fun thing is that there are always these fairies, right? And I don't know if you know this, but did you know that Disney was a part, like an official member of something called the Fairy Investigative Society?
Oh, I didn't know that, but I love it so much.
Yes. It was like started by a knight. He was like like a legit dude in Britain. There were a lot of really intelligent upper class people who were part of this, and you had to sign a contract saying you believed in fairies and that you were investigating them. And so that's why I think that Disney was actually pretty sincere in his beliefs in these things. And I don't go into it as much. Well, I do into it in the book. I do talk about this, but I also have a video out about this that goes into it even some more, like a little bit of the linguistics and things. But fairy essentially is you probably know this. Maybe I should hand this off to you. Why is fair? What do fairies have to do with all of this, Julie?
Oh, well, I'm excited to hear your thoughts on it, but fairies, right? They are hidden, they're not seen. And so anything when we play with anything that's hidden and not seen, that's always going to relate back to the divine feminine, right? Because the divine feminine is veiled, it's hidden. But there's these protectresses, there's these magical creatures, and they always are there in conjunction with helping the divine feminine rise, right? Like helping someone come out of their sleep or be awakened or find the divine feminine.
Hey everyone, thanks for being here. I just wanted to take a second and invite you to check out the links in the show notes and comments below this video to my new book, All Things in One: Reuniting Religion with the Woman in the Wilderness, where we explore questions like, does deep diving into deep doctrine mean going off the deep end and losing my faith, friends, and family? Why does the Book of Mormon mention so few women? Why do members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believe in a Heavenly Mother yet know so little about her? And what does all this have to do with the Latter-day Zion? All Things in One: Reuniting Religion with the Woman in the Wilderness is a quest for the divine feminine that leads us through the murky terrain of time, folklore, apocryphal texts, and the words of prophets, ancient and modern, to discover how men and women can work together to gather all truth in one in Christ and be reunited with both a mother and a father in heaven. Get yourself or a loved one a copy of All Things in One: Reuniting Religion with the Woman in the Wilderness on Amazon Kindle and Audible.
What were you going to say about fairies, though? I'm so.
Oh, I think you'd have to read the book, otherwise it's just gonna sound way too hokey. But basically, I relate it to the idea of ascension, of ascended beings, the idea of translation, things like that, that as the divine feminine got squelched more and more, right, throughout the centuries by the church, she kept fleeing into the wilderness in different ways. And at first it was like the church, like Mary Magdalene literally flees into the Roman Empire. And then you have this massive persecution, like you were saying there in the south of France, you have these Cathars, and they flee to this land called Albion or England, right? And they were the Albigens, which means white, it means pure. You have these Cathari. So it's this idea of brightness, of purity, which we have all over the Book of Mormon, right? The whiteness, the purity. Unfortunately, sometimes we believe that that has something to do with our actual skin color, but it's not. It's talking about like this spiritual purity, like when Christ comes to the American continent and these Nephites are there in his presence, and it says his countenance smiled upon them, right? And it says they shone. And so what do we hear about these magical beings who are eternal and have all these powers, right? These spiritual gifts and things like that. They shine, they're bright, they're eternal. So you can see how a lot of this stuff morphed into that mythology as it was pushed out as sort of the mainstream of the church, this idea of ascension, and instead it turned into these fairy tales, essentially.
Yeah, totally. And you can see that these things come together. I just wanted to make a comment on that. Like you see as Mandy talks about this all the time, Mandy Green, but this idea of like when you pull the threads, there are always more threads. There's always more and more and more. And so when you start looking for patterns, and I've been saying this so much recently, but it's just true. Like patterns are power. If you can find the pattern, you have all the power. And so when you look at things like this, like why are fairies and unicorns and mermaids like where they're always lumped together for some reason, they always end up being together. And it's because they have a common thread. There's this common thread of the divine feminine and of ascension and of, creation and becoming. And they're all lumped together because they're this mystical piece, which we have such an attachment to.
Mm.
We don't realize why, but we have such an attachment to it. It's part of us, but we kind of relegate it to childhood when I think in every person, there's kind of this deep longing for that magic mystic that the divine feminine brings, right? We miss the part of us that has been cast out into the wilderness and we long to bring it back. And that's why we gravitate towards these things and you can't get rid of them. No matter how the church tried, like it couldn't get rid of it.
Right. And it's funny because really, and this is getting a little off topic, but in this day and age, we sort of have this disdain, right, for these tales, and unfortunately, that means for the divine feminine, because we have these modern sensibilities, and we're like, oh, she's this hapless female, she's so weak, and and this and that, and so like, there's all this controversy over the new Snow White film because oh, we've modernized it, so she's this strong woman. And unfortunately, what we mean in this day and age by strong woman is she's more like a man. Do you see
Yes.
that?
Yep.
Right?
100%. Yep.
Yeah. And the problem with that is then we completely dismiss what it means to be a strong woman. And a
Hmm.
strong woman is so much more powerful from my point of view than she would be if she were more like a man. Like, yes, Prince Charming has that sword and he's got that shield and he's out there like kicking butt physically and stuff like that. But what we miss is the power of the divine feminine. She doesn't need to go out with a sword and kick butt because she has magical powers. All of nature comes together. All of nature is at her disposal, right? All of her little friends and the fairies and things like that. Her power goes way beyond like the nitty-gritty sort of, like fist and muscle kind of day to day of eking out a living. She goes way beyond that. So, did you have anything to say about that?
Well, yeah, I just think it's so funny because we have these things about like empower women. We need to empower women and we need to help women feel stronger. And but the picture that we paint, the way that we empower women, and like in this case in Snow White and things like that, is to masculinize them, to masculinize the feminine, to make them more masculine so they're more palatable. And that's what women have been told for so long is to be successful, to be powerful, you must be like a man. You have to take up the man's part in everything. You have to become more masculine. And so I think it's just interesting because it just shows our aversion to the feminine and that we have forgotten her exactly what you were saying, her actual hidden power, that she is all of creation. Literally all of creation comes through her, right? This power that women have to create and ascend and to bring everything together in one. That's like such a feminine power that we have, and we've traded it for this. No, you always have to be pushing, go, 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 do, do, do. It doesn't matter who you are; it only matters what you do. And that's just not the truth. The feminine is about being and becoming and actually transforming and actually being in that womb space, right? That womb space where anything is possible. And that's why lots of times we get scared about this, but that the feminine is associated with like colors like black or darkness. We get really scared about it, but the reason that the feminine is associated with those things is because it's imitating the womb. The womb is dark, right? It's like a cave. It's dark, it's wet, it's warm, it's where creation happens. And that's where creation really starts. Even for seeds, we plant them in the dark ground first, that fertile ground. But we are so scared of that we masculinize and we say everything has to be the sun all the time. It has to be sunny all the time. It has to be bright all the time. We have to talk about going, getting everything from heaven down rather than from the earth up. And so this concept really anchors us into one way of viewing the world and in one way of viewing things as good or right. And that's why so many women are suffering right now, because it just doesn't work for us. Like the masculine has literally burned, it's scorched everything. Like what happens when the sun is out for too long? Well, it scorches everything becomes a desert. And that's what's happening. Women are experiencing the desert and they don't even realize why, because they keep trying to do the good things, the right thing to do, and push rather than embracing the power of rest and rejuvenation and letting things come to them as well.
Right. But the problem is, and you touched on this earlier, is there does need to be this balance between the masculine and feminine. And in order to embrace true femininity, you have to embrace true masculinity on some level. Now, that doesn't mean that every woman has to be married, right? And to embrace this birthing creative thing that all women have doesn't mean every woman has to have a baby. But we do need that masculine counterpart there to provide a structure and a space for us in which to be, right? In which to find that stillness so that we can become. I know in my own experience, I went through a real, we would call a heroine's journey, right? And we can discuss that a bit. I'm also going to discuss that also with a bit with our mutual friend Jayanne. But I went through this real dark period in my life. And my husband and I mean, we had a pretty good relationship, but I went through a period where I had to be completely dependent on him, like for my survival. I didn't have a choice. And he really stepped up in that. And because I felt like because we did have that dynamic, as I healed, I started experiencing just massive spiritual growth. I just started, I was getting visions and I'm getting like, just all of these things, or I'm recognizing them for the first time because I think I was always getting them. It's like, I'm like Sleeping Beauty. I was just kind of always asleep. And then, oh, all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait a minute. And so I'm developing these spiritual gifts and all of these things. And as I start to ascend, now I can bring my husband with me and my children. I invite them in. And now, because he's so busy dealing with the nitty-gritty, every day going out and slaying dragons kind of thing, he doesn't have the time and the space to do that. But I do. And my husband's always been a spiritual guy. He's always been an amazing person. But now he's waking up and he's experiencing things, right? And now we're closer than ever because of this journey that we've taken together, right? And to me, that's what it means to have the masculine and feminine in balance in that way.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned the blackness of the womb. I was thinking about also in native cultures and things like that. For them, the more black something was, the more life it had, right? The more black the soil is, the more that you can grow. And so we have this image of the Black Madonna. I believe, I don't know if you mentioned that earlier, but in the south of France, like there's St. Victor's Basilica there, or you mentioned Sarah, right? And yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about this idea of the Black Madonna?
Oh, yes. I would love to talk about this.
Yeah.
So, for people who don't know what a Madonna is a Madonna is usually a statue or a painting, a representation of Mary the Virgin, right? The Virgin Mother is the Madonna. And oftentimes the Madonna is seen as like the most perfect woman, right? Like this beautiful virgin woman. And during this time, like we talked about, going back to Mary Magdalene's story, and when she is teaching and there starts to be a following for her, but the church is coming down on them. So they have to take everything underground. And part of the way they do that is they start creating these black Madonnas. And the color black is associated with hidden, right? It's the hidden, it's the veiled, it's the occult. And so the black Madonnas, although people would say, like the church would recognize them and say, oh, this is just the Virgin Mary, you just did it in black, it actually was meant to represent Mary Magdalene and her place of, power, beauty, and her ascension and her ties to Christ and everything that she did. This is also applied to her daughter, oftentimes, Sarah. So oftentimes, Sarah will be painted as black, like as a black little girl, um, or in a statue in black, because she's also hidden, right? She was the hidden gift inside of Mary when Christ died, if you want to even take it further. And so in this place in De la Mer, where she supposedly surfaced, they actually have, they have Black Madonnas everywhere. They have them all over France and all over the UK. But in this particular place, they have a Black Madonna representing Sarah as well. And so, and every year they have this festival and they celebrate and remember Mary Magdalene coming up out of the water and her daughter Sarah, because in French culture, they believed that they were from the bloodline of Christ, because they believed that Sarah actually married into French royalty. And that's where the fleur de lis comes from. The fleur de lis is it's that three-petaled flower. And so it represents this coming together of Mary Magdalene and their daughter Sarah. And it can have lots of different representations, but because she married into that bloodline, France then sees itself as, divine royalty. So that's kind of where the Black Madonna comes from. You can see her everywhere, see her hidden. I would love to tie this a little bit to, should we talk about The Little Mermaid?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, with this one. If we're talking about fairy tales, I love talking about this one. So as you could imagine, so thinking about these tales surfacing. So in Germany, of course, we have the Brothers Grimm, and we have these tales kind of spreading all over the place. But a lot of people believe that the base of this tale is actually based on this idea of Mary Magdalene coming up out of the water, right? Just like Venus. If you look at the picture that Da Vinci did of Venus, she's coming up out of the water, and what her hair is red. It's red, just like Mary Magdalene's hair is red. And what is the Little Mermaid, the color of Little Mermaid's hair? It's red. It's always red. Look at all the old paintings of the Little Mermaid. It's always red. And so what happens to her? Well, she comes out of the water. She tries to grow legs. And what has she lost? She's lost her voice. She can't speak. She's hidden. Her true identity is hidden, just like the Black Madonna, right? It takes on a different shade. They paint over paint the Madonna black so that that it's her, so they could hide her. And in the same way, this the Little Mermaid has lost her voice. And I want to talk a little bit about the fact that she's a mermaid, because this actually matters a lot, this joint between being a human and a fish. So, and I'm sure you have lots of thoughts about this too, Jocelyn, but one thing I want to talk about, which we haven't talked about, is something it sounds like a really technical term, but I promise like you'll understand it really quickly. But it's called the precession of the equinoxes. So the precession of the equinoxes, have you talked about this at all?
No,
Okay,
no, but
I'm
I
so
am
excited.
familiar. I'm totally familiar with this. I actually learned it from Mandy.
Okay, this is
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah. So the precession of the equinoxes, so as the earth turns, right? As the years go by, there is a constellation that rises over the horizon. And that constellation changes very slowly over time. I can't remember the exact, it's about 2000 years or so it takes for the constellation to change. And when the constellation over the horizon changes, it's it's this is the procession of the equinoxes. It's this idea that as time moves by, you can keep time, or in, I guess we would call it like dispensations or something like that. Like each dispensation is related to the constellation that comes over the horizon. So what that looks like is, for example, during Moses's time, they worshipped a golden calf. Why did they worship a golden calf? Well, they worshipped a golden calf because that time period, that dispensation was associated with the time of Taurus. That Taurus was on the horizon during that time. And so because Taurus is a bull, all the Egyptians and everyone around was they were representing the royal family, the heavenly family, the divine family, with the bull, the calf, and of course the cow. Right. So that's where we get like Hathor. Hathor is the mother of the heavens during that time. And she's a cow because it's the procession of the equinoxes. And at that time, it's the time of Taurus. And so when they are worshiping a golden calf, they're trying to actually worship Jesus. Like they're trying to worship the son because the calf represents the son of God, the son of the bull, but they're just doing it in a way that God is displeased with, right? They're trying to do the right thing, but it just isn't turning out the way that they want it to. And so we can see this throughout the Bible and throughout all of history. We can see the time of Aries. Like think about Aries is the ram. So think about when we're sacrificing the ram during the Bible, when rams are really, really important. So during Jesus's time, what time of the equinox is it? It's the time of Pisces. And Pisces is represented by two fish. And this is why, like, it's not a mistake that Jesus is always talking about fish, okay? That he's like bringing fish and that he's symbolized by a fish. It's not a surprise. It's not a coincidence. It's because that is the time of Pisces, which we're kind of still in as we merge into the time of Aquarius right now, the age of Aquarius. And so because it's the age of Pisces, that's where we start getting the mermaids. The mermaids start to come out during the time of Pisces, representing the first carving that I'm aware of was in Italy, and they have a mermaid and a merman together, and it's meant to represent Christ and Mary Magdalene. And so as Mary rises out of the ocean, right? Of course, that's the perfect imagery for her because she's a mermaid. She's literally a mermaid. She is the little mermaid. And it's this time of Pisces. It's harkening back to everything that Pisces represents. Because it's two fish, it's representing that coming together of the divine feminine and the divine masculine and Christ and Mary. And so that's why it's really important that she's half person, half fish. Do you have other thoughts? There's so much we could say about this, but do you have other thoughts about that, Jocelyn?
All right. So my thought on that is I'm thinking about how Disney, even though he was dead, they still seem to carry all of this stuff. Somehow, I don't know if like there was a secret vault somewhere where he wrote this stuff down, but so much of it is even in the new Little Mermaid, like you mentioned with the red hair and her losing her voice, and then her name is Ariel. And so Ariel, that is from Isaiah. So I pulled it up here. We've got Isaiah 29:1. It says, "Woe to you, Ariel, Ariel, the city where David settled." And the city where David settled, like, is Jerusalem. It's talking about Zion. So here you have Ariel, and she is the woman Zion, which, oh my gosh, that's in my book. I go into that so much in depth. But she is this woman Zion, and you could connect that to so much other mythology that we probably don't want to get into, but like Atlantis or things like that, being
Oh,
the city,
totally.
right? Like there's just so
Yeah.
much to do with water. But that is her. They're making that connection to this mermaid who represents Zion. But like you said, you need both the masculine and feminine. And right now, what we keep getting over and over again, and I talk about this in the book as well, is the divine feminine keeps getting taken out. You have this pattern all throughout the Book of Mormon. That's the pride cycle, in case, anybody hasn't read the book yet. That is the pride cycle. It's not just that people become wealthy. It's a threefold process it's this pattern, like you said, that God gives us so that we may not be deceived. We're empowered if we can see these patterns. And the pattern that we're told in the Damascus document actually is yes, it's going to be this idea of hoarding wealth. That's one of Satan's tactics. But the other one is going to be denigrating women. And the third one is going to be changing this doctrine of Christ or doctrine of ascension of Zion. And the way that he usually does that, particularly in the Book of Mormon, is by messing around with the temple doctrine or generally just messing around with the temple. So the temple is where we learn about this process of ascension and Zion, basically, and committing to that. So this is what keeps happening is she keeps getting taken out. And so what we're left with is the masculine. Like you said, it's just this masculine form of religion that is bereft of the spirit of it of and she is the actual spirit of the law. She is what that flame that that ignites it, that is the power, that source of light essentially behind that. And so what's super fascinating is in The Little Mermaid, in the original, 1989 cartoon or whatever, there's this painting in there. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen it?
Which one are you talking
Okay.
about? Is it the one
So
the ship? No.
it's in her grotto under the sea where she collects all of these things, right? She has all of this stuff from the other world that she's brought into the sea. And there's this painting, it's called, I wrote it down, Magdalene with the Smoking Flame. Yeah. So they have a painting of Mary Magdalene there in Ariel's grotto. Like that is not a coincidence.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, and I think there's always kind of been this underground. Well, one, there are two things going on here, I think. One, we have to acknowledge, kind of like we talked about, that all these concepts are hidden in the subconscious of
Mm.
all of us, of the collective consciousness, right? Like all of this is in there. Like all of our history is in the subconscious of the collective, and it comes out in these ways. But also, I think if you think back, even I to like Thomas Jefferson, for example, he has over 8 paintings of Mary Magdalene in his home. Okay. And like the way his home is shaped. So our forefathers, and there were a lot of elite men who knew about a lot of this stuff that was passed down, passed through. And we can see some of this connection that comes through the Knights Templar and things like that. And maybe that's how this information got passed down. But we do have this pattern of, even though women couldn't speak out as much or say things or whatever, a lot of these men who bring about great things, if you look underneath, they know about the divine feminine. Like they at least know about Christ and Mary, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I think it's unfortunate because then she is so vilified and has been so vilified over the centuries that people look at these powerful men or these symbols of the divine feminine and they equate it with like these evil secret societies and things like that. And right, they're very much conflated. And that's not to say that there aren't secret societies that don't manipulate or pervert these kinds of things. But Disney, it's believed, was a Rosicrucian, which is an offshoot, right, of the Knights Templar. So, and of course, then you have all this Freemasonry and stuff like that involved with and I'm hoping to have a conversation actually with my friend about that. So we'll bring it back now to the fairy tales and things because there's just so much that we could talk about. So let's talk about the idea again of the Black Madonna and the concept of Cinderella, because you see it,
Mm.
right? You see it in that as well. So what do we see about her in the story of Cinderella?
Right. Well, let's talk about why is she called Cinderella, right? She's called Cinderella because she falls asleep by the fire and she gets covered in cinders, so much so that she's black, right? That it puts all those ash over her face. And this is just a callback to the Black Madonna being hidden in that black paint, right? And again, Cinderella, her true power, she is the princess, right? She goes to the ball and everybody knows she's the belle of the ball. It's showing her true self. And who else do we see show up in this one? A fairy godmother, right? An ascended being helping her out, protecting her, and helping to wipe away that blackness, helping to wipe away the soot so that people can see her and so she can see herself for who she truly is. And so I think this is, again, calling back that hiddenness and the this idea of, the black being covered in darkness or being veiled and people not being able to see it. And also, of course, you've got her stepmothers who are involved, her stepsisters and her stepmother who's involved. And it's to me, they represent like the false feminine that comes through, and that false feminine that hides the true feminine. And I do think, in many ways, our culture pushing women to be a certain way or pushing women to be like men is that false feminine. Because like what do the stepsisters do and the stepmother, what do? They ostracize her for not being like them. They tell her to work, work, work. She
Mhm.
has to do, do, do. She has to prove her worth. And also, they're out there trying to parade themselves as what she truly is, right? They're trying to pretend they have the same heart that she does, but they don't. It's all falsity.
In grotesque ways, sometimes even, right? Like they are mutilating themselves in the original tales. The sisters are, they cut off their feet, so that they fit in her slipper. Were there some other things that I'm forgetting? I don't.
Yeah, yeah, like they cut off their toes, they try to slip it in. And I think they both do. Like one of them cuts off the heel, the other one cuts
Oh
off the
yeah,
toe.
yeah.
And it's just this way of like what we've been told, right? Conform yourself into this box and like fit into the shoes and cut off these parts of yourself if necessary. You need to
Oh.
just cut off these parts of yourself because they're bad. They're too whatever, too out there. They're not conforming to what we want, and fit it into this shoe so that you can be
Yeah.
seen by the masculine.
And I see that so much in this day and age, more than ever. I mean, we think of, oh, these poor women who had to wear corsets back in the day, or they would bind the feet of other women. And it's like, yeah, but we do it every bit as much, if not more so, because we live in an era where the false, I would say the whore of Babylon, right? That kind of thing is so worshipped that the only worth that women have in this day and age, like you said, is either to be masculine and to be like a producer and a consumer, right? Or it is to be sexualized. Like it is to be, and there's nothing wrong with our sexuality. You and I know that. We embrace
Mhm.
that. Um, but the idea is you have to be like in this phase where you are this maiden eternally.
Mhm.
Like you
Mhm.
are always sexually available to all men and interesting to all men, even when you're in your 50s and 60s, which is
Yep.
absolutely insane, right? We
Mhm.
never embrace the other phases of the moon, the other phases of
Mhm.
femininity. There are so
Mhm.
many to go through, and there's so much worth in that. See, can I tell you something? I'm just going to tell you. This is kind of crazy, but and I'm not trying to shame anyone out there, right, for how they groom, like how I get it. I'm a YouTuber. I've been on YouTube. I have another channel with like thousands and thousands of followers, and I get it. It's just that's just the world we live in. But I remember a while ago, I was praying to know how can I get closer to you. And there was even like this conference talk. It was What Lack I Yet? And he was talking about really simple things like getting answers, like cleaning up your room or something. And so I said, okay, what lack I yet? Like, what do you want me to do to be closer to you? And I wasn't that great at receiving revelation, like that I thought was revelation, but I got like a really clear answer, and it was to stop dyeing my hair. And I was like, and I was, like I said, I was on this other channel and it was just, and I'd been through a lot physically. I had morphed through this years of illness and things, and I was really self-conscious. And I had a hard time, but I tried. I went back to my natural color because I was blonde, and then, and then I went back and I started trying to go gray. My husband could not handle that. He was like, no. And so it took me, unfortunately, longer. But I got the answer a second time, stop dyeing your hair. Now, I'm not saying it's evil to dye your hair. I mean, you go ahead, dye your hair. But for me, like that was the answer that I got of how I personally needed to pull back from, I would say, these false expectations that are placed on us that we try to live up to. And what I've realized is that if we try to maintain this like youthful sexuality our whole lives, we aren't the maiden. We are the evil stepmother. Because
Yeah.
that is right, that is who she is. She is so
Mhm.
threatened by the youth and beauty of the virgin or the hidden woman or stuff like that that she just has to take her out and get her out because she has to be that. She has not embraced the next phase of what it means to be the mature woman who moves on to become wise and who, lets go of all of that so that she can embrace something else in her life.
Oh, 100%, and I think if people are interested, they can listen to the podcast, Feminine Alchemy. We go over this a lot. We talk about the phases of womanhood, the maiden, the mother, and the crone. And just so people know, crone doesn't mean, what we have demonized it to mean this decrepit woman, of course, but crone actually means crowned one. You're the crowned one. That's what the crone is. It's the crowned one. And we have gotten ourselves stuck in this loop so much that we are willing to, like, just like those stepsisters, right? We're willing to cut off our heel if it takes it, right? Like we're willing to cut off our toe just to fit into the slipper, exactly like you were saying. And again, to reiterate, of course, you're not a bad person if you dye your hair. Of course, if you, all of us, want to get rid of some wrinkles and we want our skin to be beautiful. And, there's nothing wrong with that. And especially the feminine is so centered on the body, but not in the ways that we think it is. But the feminine is so centered on the body, and we get so caught up in trying to make it look beautiful instead of trying to nourish it, and instead of trying to nourish it and make it creative and bloom and blossom, and allow yourself to be proud of the phase you're in. Be proud of the mother phase, be proud of the medicine woman phase, be proud of the matriarch, the crone phase. And when we do that, we just give up some of our authenticity. We're really just giving up our authenticity to do what the masculine would like, right? The masculine is very focused on the outward, right? The outward appearance, where the feminine is focused on the inward and the being. So I just think that's so interesting that you got that answer. And I think that for myself too, I think putting down pieces of my vanity, letting go of that has really helped me to dive into the divine feminine. And I think in many ways, like, makes you more attractive. It brings more attractive. I mean, I don't think there's anything more attractive than like a woman who knows who she is, and like those beautiful crones, like the beautiful women, they're just shining through their eyes because they're not worried about what anybody thinks. They have full confidence in themselves.
Yeah, the true power that women have, right? And it comes in phases, and sometimes it's that sexuality, because that certainly is something powerful that we all have. But as we sort of let go of the things of this world and continue to ascend and embrace you, like that crown, that halo of white, there's just so much more. There's just so much more to womanhood. And yes, men do not only love that, but they crave it and they need it. And the children do too. Children want grandmothers. I remember the safest place in the world for me when I ran away from my home was my grandma's. Not because she was so accomplished and because she was so beautiful, it was because she was there and she was present and she was loving. And that is what I needed in my life. And I think that actually is a great segue into what I feel is the message of these fairy tales. What do we have at the end of every fairy tale, right? When the woman, she goes through this journey and she wakes up to who she is, and she's in a position now where the prince can rise up, to fight the dragon so that he can be with her, because he's got to ascend too. And at the end of every fairy tale, what you end with is true love, because that's ultimately what this is about. The message, when bringing it back to the idea of Mary and Jesus and Zion, is the God of love. It really, right? It really is about that, because and 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 the what I'm thinking of when I think of that is, as women, we cannot embody that, we can't share that if we don't love ourselves. That is the first step. So, did you have any thoughts on any of that, Julie?
No, I just think that you put that so beautifully, and it's just so true. It's really about this message of pure love, right? This love, that God is love, and that when we come together, that's the whole point. the whole point of bringing the masculine and the feminine together is creation, is love, right? And true creation comes from that pure, unadulterated love. And I think that's kind of what every religion and every message has in common is we're all just looking for that pure unadulterated unconditional love because it elevates everything. It causes creation and ascension, and so to love is to ascend, and I think that is truly the message of the divine feminine and these fairy tales.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, is there anything else that you had on your mind that has been running through your head as we've been talking about the divine feminine in relation to these symbols and these fairy tales?
Well, I think I just want to say, there's always so much more. There's layers and layers, and we've pointed out some layers of this, but we didn't even get to talk about the idea of Sleeping Beauty as the tower, right? She's in the
Oh, yeah.
tower, this tower of ascension, the Magdala, which is, a name for Mary Magdalene. She is the tower, the Magdala, and women are the tower, right? We're that part of the temple that sees, we get that vision. But that's just one example of you can dig deeper and deeper and deeper into these. And because all of this is in our cultural subconscious,
Hmm.
right, you'll find more and more and more. And as you explore these things, it's not to say that like you need to be Snow White or you need to be Sleeping Beauty or you need to act like Cinderella. It's about this idea of understanding what the divine feminine can do for you, how you can apply it into your life. So maybe you can see that as the message we've been talking about, which is waking up to your power. Like the more you understand that every woman, you are the lost princess.
Hmm.
You are. You are the lost princess. And it's time to go on your heroine's journey. It's time to fall down the rabbit hole. We fall down that's like the first step. You fall down the rabbit hole. And to talk about another little story, which isn't quite a fairy tale, but Alice in Wonderland, there's lots of divine feminine themes there as well. But, don't be afraid of this journey. Just know that it's going to bring you back. You're going to get to that ascension. Even if you have to descend first, you're going to get to that ascension place, which I'm sure you and Jan will talk about a lot. But just knowing that there is, if you've been searching for this, if you've been wanting to know the divine feminine, she's all around you. I'm telling you, 70 symbols. We're on 70 symbols of the divine feminine. She is everywhere. She's everywhere. And she's just waiting for you so that you can open your eyes, wake up like Sleeping Beauty, and be the true princess that you are.
And I love that. And I love that you always want to bring it back to something practical that we can apply to our lives, because that's really what this is all about. Like, it's great to learn and it's fun to talk about these things, but at the end of the day, like, we're the ones who just need to embody that. And I would say, like, these symbols that you've brought out, the fleur de lis, right? Or the unicorn, or why don't you just list off just a couple more and I'll finish my point.
Should I do the scary ones?
Ooh,
Or
yeah.
this well, we'll do ones that are people will know. We talked about the mermaid, we talked about the unicorn, we talked about the fleur de lis. The rose is another one. These are all
Briar,
associated with Mary
Briar
Magdalene.
Rose, Sleeping Beauties,
Briar
Briar
Rose.
Rose.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Of course. Briar Rose. But some other ones that are a little scarier for us to think about, but are very important. The serpent is
Correct.
one to really think about. The snake, the spider is one to think about. I'm sure people are like, oh, let me give you some more fun ones, right? The jaguar, the wolf.
Mm.
These are ones to think about of the feminine, the ocean, the moon, the tide. These are all divine feminine. And of course, we talked about the tree, but there are so many more. Pomegranates. We could get into
Yeah.
so much here, but just to give people an idea, like it's all around you. And I think symbols are so important because they give us something tangible to look at.
Mhm.
You know what a snake is like because you can see one, right? It's tangible to you and you can learn from it. And so take these symbols and learn from them, and they will teach you what the divine feminine's all about.
Yeah. And so I would say, just building on what you said earlier, we are naturally drawn to these things. Every little girl loves mermaids. Every little girl loves unicorns. And in some ways, we have that trained out of us as we get older because, oh, that's just silliness or that. And it's actually not. There's a reason why we're drawn to these things. And so I would say, in going forward, if there's anything that you take from this, it's to just follow your intuition as a woman, right? Take that time to stop doing and go, 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 and be. Realize that that's actually not where your worth lies. And if you can embrace some stillness in your life, if you can take a step back and cut a few things out of your life, and then start, like you said, going down that rabbit hole and just say, what am I drawn to? Like, what is it that I've always loved that gets me excited, that motivates me, that I wanted to be for Halloween as a little girl, and go from there. And if you need any more direction on any of that, Julie has this amazing Feminine Alchemist School where she teaches all of these fantastic things that I had to learn on my own years ago when I wanted to learn about living in my natural cycles and things like that. She'll teach you all of those things. So, Julia, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And I've got you totally scheduled for another one. We're going to have you back here to have a second conversation and get some more into the Bible and astrology and all of that. So I'm super excited for that. But thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your time with us.
Of course, it's always a pleasure, Jocelyn.